Many of the most disturbing parts of narcissistic behavior only become clear after you completely walk away. One of the biggest truths is this: many narcissistic people do not fully recognize your value until they no longer have any access to you. The longer you remain silent, the more their mind begins reacting in ways they never expected. Today, we're exploring what often happens inside a narcissist's mind after a long period of no contact. If this video helps you better understand narcissistic behavior, remember to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Long-term no contact removes something that many narcissists quietly depend on: emotional control. That control is not always obvious. It does not always appear through loud arguments or clear manipulation. Sometimes it is much more subtle. It is the comfort of believing they can contact you whenever they want and still receive a response. It is the belief that your emotions are still connected to them, or the assumption that they continue to occupy your thoughts even after creating distance. That emotional access gives them a powerful sense of certainty and control. They may ignore you, disappear for weeks or months, treat you poorly, or stay emotionally unavailable, while still believing they can return whenever they choose and continue influencing the way you feel. Long periods of no contact completely break that expectation. The moment you stop replying, stop reaching out, stop reacting, and begin moving forward emotionally, they lose the ability to predict you. They no longer know what you are feeling, whether you still care, or even if they still have a place in your life. For someone whose self-image depends heavily on maintaining control, that uncertainty can become deeply uncomfortable. Your silence quietly proves they are no longer shaping your emotional world the way they once believed. Stay with me, because what happens next explains why silence often affects them far more than they ever expected. That loss of influence often triggers several different reactions. Some narcissists become angry. Others suddenly appear kind, apologetic, or unusually caring. Some begin searching for indirect ways to capture your attention again. Even though these reactions may look completely different on the surface, they often come from the same source: the realization that your life may no longer revolve around them. Silence creates deep insecurity because it removes the emotional feedback many narcissists rely on. They often measure their importance by the emotional reactions they receive. Whether those reactions are love, anger, sadness, frustration, or desperation, each one reassures them that they still have influence over your emotions. As long as they can affect how you feel, they experience a sense of power. But during extended no contact, those emotional signals completely disappear. Now they no longer know whether you still miss them, whether you have healed, whether you have found happiness without them, or whether someone else has taken the place they once believed belonged only to them. That uncertainty can become mentally exhausting because narcissistic personalities often struggle with situations they cannot control or predict. Even if they act completely unaffected, many spend far more time thinking about your silence than they would ever admit. Their mind keeps searching for answers to explain the absence of information. Over time, that uncertainty can slowly grow into self-doubt. Someone who once felt completely confident in their ability to influence you may begin questioning whether they truly mattered as much as they always believed. Your silence quietly challenges the story they have been telling themselves for a very long time. Don't miss the next part, because this is where the psychological shift becomes even more revealing. Many narcissists believe that people remain emotionally attached to them forever. Long-term no contact directly challenges that belief. That is why some eventually return with unexpected messages, emotional apologies, fake concern, or subtle attempts to find their way back into your life. Your silence forces them to face something they were never prepared for. You may no longer be emotionally available for them to control. In the beginning, many narcissists respond by pretending they simply do not care because protecting their image is extremely important to them. They may convince themselves that they were the one who walked away, that they never needed the relationship, or that you will eventually come back on your own. These thoughts help protect their ego from facing the uncomfortable possibility that they have actually lost their influence. But as more time passes without hearing from you, maintaining that story becomes increasingly difficult. Every day of silence reminds them that they can no longer predict your actions, your emotions, or your future. That uncertainty slowly weakens the confidence they once had. They may begin checking for signs of your life through mutual friends, social media, or indirect conversations. They may replay old memories, wonder whether you have changed, or imagine scenarios where you have completely moved on. The less information they receive, the more their imagination begins filling the empty spaces. Ironically, the emotional control they once believed they had slowly disappears because they are no longer receiving the reactions they depended on. Instead of controlling your emotions, they become occupied with their own unanswered questions. Your silence becomes louder than any argument ever could. It quietly communicates that your life is moving forward without their approval, attention, or involvement. And for someone who built their confidence around always having emotional access, that realization can become one of the most unsettling experiences they ever face. When all communication ends after an emotionally intense relationship, many narcissistic people often feel the loss much sooner than they are willing to admit. Instead of showing genuine hurt or vulnerability, they usually hide behind emotional distance, confidence, or complete indifference. To them, admitting emotional pain can feel like revealing weakness. That is why some suddenly appear happier than ever. They may fill social media with carefully chosen photos, show off a new relationship, display endless confidence, or act as though your absence changed nothing. On the surface, it may seem like they moved on overnight. In reality, this behavior is often less about true happiness and more about protecting the image they want others and even themselves to believe. Pretending not to care can also become another form of emotional manipulation. If they appear completely unaffected, they may hope you begin feeling rejected, jealous, insecure, or tempted to break no contact. Many narcissists understand emotional reactions extremely well. Acting emotionally detached can become another way of trying to regain influence without directly asking for your attention. Real indifference is usually calm, quiet, and consistent. Fake indifference often feels exaggerated, performative, and carefully designed to be noticed. The harder someone tries to convince everyone they do not care, the greater the possibility that your silence is affecting them far more deeply than they will ever admit. As no contact continues, many eventually turn to emotional tactics such as hoovering, guilt, or sudden affection because they slowly realize they have lost something they quietly depended on: access to your emotions. Stay with me, because what happens next reveals why they often return when you least expect it. Without emotional access, they can no longer predict your reactions, influence your feelings, or assume you will always be available whenever they decide to come back. Once that influence disappears, many narcissists become deeply uncomfortable, especially if they believed you would always remain emotionally attached to them. Rather than accepting that the relationship has truly ended, some begin searching for ways to pull you back into communication. This is often where hoovering begins. Hoovering happens when a narcissist attempts to re-enter your life after a period of silence by using emotional strategies designed to restart contact. Sometimes the approach appears sincere and caring. They may suddenly apologize, admit mistakes, tell you they miss you, or display a level of vulnerability you rarely saw before. At other times, they rely on guilt. They might remind you of meaningful memories, difficult experiences you shared together, or sacrifices they claim they made for you. They may reach out on birthdays, holidays, or anniversaries because they understand those moments can weaken emotional boundaries. Another common strategy is an unexpected wave of affection. Someone who once seemed emotionally distant or unavailable may suddenly become loving, attentive, and expressive. That dramatic change can make it seem as though they have completely transformed. But in many situations, the affection is less about building a healthy relationship and more about restoring emotional access. Once that connection is reestablished, the familiar unhealthy patterns often begin returning little by little. Beneath these different behaviors usually lies the same goal: proving to themselves that they still have the power to influence your emotions whenever they choose. Don't miss the next part, because this hidden pattern explains why many continue watching even after months of silence. Even after long periods of no contact, many narcissists continue observing from a distance. They may stop communicating directly, but they often remain curious about your life because they still want emotional awareness and a sense of psychological access. Completely losing control is difficult for many narcissistic personalities. As a result, they sometimes search for indirect ways to monitor your healing, your relationships, or your personal growth without openly admitting they are still paying attention. Social media makes this incredibly easy. Some repeatedly visit your profile, watch your stories, unexpectedly react to older posts, or seem to appear online whenever you are active. Others create anonymous or fake accounts to quietly observe your life while maintaining the appearance that they have completely moved on. Much of this behavior is driven by the need for reassurance that they still affect you emotionally. They search for signs that you are lonely, angry, heartbroken, or still emotionally attached because those signals reinforce the belief that they continue to occupy space in your emotional world. Mutual friends and family members may also become indirect sources of information. A narcissist may casually ask how you're doing, unexpectedly mention your name, or quietly gather updates about your life while pretending it means nothing. These conversations are often intentionally subtle so they can appear completely indifferent while secretly staying informed. Understanding this pattern is important because it is usually driven far less by genuine love and much more by an unresolved need for control. They may not truly miss the relationship in a healthy emotional sense. Instead, they struggle with the realization that your life can continue peacefully without their presence, attention, or influence. For many narcissists, losing emotional access hurts the ego even more than losing the relationship itself. That is because relationships often become closely connected to validation, control, admiration, and personal identity. Instead of experiencing the relationship as an equal emotional partnership, they may unconsciously view it as a steady source of attention, reassurance, praise, or influence. As long as they still have access to you, they feel secure knowing they continue to matter inside your emotional world. Even negative attention can satisfy that need because it confirms they still have an emotional impact. But when no contact remains strong and consistent, that feeling of importance slowly begins fading away. They are no longer receiving emotional reactions, updates about your life, or confirmation that you remain emotionally invested. For many narcissists, this creates what psychologists often describe as an injury to the ego. The pain usually comes far less from losing genuine intimacy, and much more from losing the feeling of significance, control, and emotional influence they once believed they had. As more time passes, they are forced to face a difficult reality. They can no longer shape your emotional world the way they once could. That realization quietly challenges the image they built of themselves. Your silence becomes proof that healing is possible, independence is real, and their influence has limits. And for someone who depended on emotional control to protect their sense of self, that lesson can be one of the hardest realities they will ever face. That is why some narcissistic people suddenly become determined to reconnect, even when they were the ones who acted distant, dismissive, or emotionally harmful throughout the relationship. Your silence forces them to face something their ego strongly resists accepting. They may no longer have the ability to affect you the way they once did. For someone whose sense of worth depends heavily on external validation, that realization can feel deeply unsettling. Behind the confident image they often project is frequently a fragile sense of self that depends on other people's reactions. When your emotional responses disappear, one of the mirrors they relied on to validate themselves disappears as well. In many cases, realizing that you have truly moved forward hurts their ego more than the breakup itself. Some narcissists also respond with anger because they can no longer manipulate your emotions. Losing that influence creates intense frustration. Many narcissistic personalities rely on provoking reactions to maintain a sense of control. Whether they trigger affection, guilt, fear, confusion, or emotional chaos, The reaction itself reassures them that they still have power over the relationship. As long as they can make you respond, defend yourself, explain your choices, chase after them, or become emotionally overwhelmed, they continue believing they are in control. Every response strengthens that belief. Long-term no contact completely breaks this cycle. Stay with me because what happens after that often reveals more than their words ever could. Your silence removes the emotional feedback they became used to receiving. Their messages may suddenly go unanswered. Their attempts to provoke you stop producing results. Guilt trips, dramatic behavior, and attention-seeking tactics no longer create the emotional reactions they expected. For many narcissists, this becomes extremely frustrating because they are no longer directing the emotional dynamic of the relationship. As time passes, that frustration can slowly turn into anger. Some react by sending hostile messages, spreading rumors, becoming passive-aggressive, or trying to damage your reputation. Others become sarcastic, dismissive, or intentionally cruel in hopes of getting any reaction at all. In many situations, this anger comes less from heartbreak and far more from a wounded ego. Your emotional distance challenges the belief that they can always return and regain influence whenever they choose. This reaction is important to understand because your calmness feels unfamiliar to them. Many narcissists are far more comfortable with emotional conflict than complete emotional distance. Arguments still keep them connected to you. Silence does not. Once they realize they can no longer control your emotions the way they once did, that loss of influence often turns into visible resentment. But while they are struggling with losing control, something much more important is quietly happening within you. And that is where the real transformation begins. Don't miss this next part because it explains why genuine healing changes everything. One of the greatest changes that happens during real no contact is the change inside you. Narcissists often notice this because emotional healing transforms the way a person carries themselves. At the beginning of no contact, it is completely normal to feel anxious, heartbroken, confused, or still emotionally attached. But as time goes by and you continue protecting your distance, something much deeper begins to happen. The emotional dependence slowly fades. The constant need for answers, validation, explanations, or closure gradually loses its grip. In its place comes a quieter and healthier kind of confidence. This confidence is not loud. It does not seek attention or try to impress anyone. It appears through emotional stability, stronger boundaries, inner peace, and a much smaller need to react. You stop organizing your emotional life around the narcissist's moods, attention, or approval. Instead, you begin rebuilding your identity outside the relationship that once consumed so much of your emotional energy. Even from a distance, this internal transformation can often be noticed. Many narcissists are highly aware of changes in emotional availability. They recognize when someone no longer chases them, no longer seeks reassurance, and no longer reacts the way they once did. Your independence quietly tells them that their influence is disappearing. For someone who depended heavily on emotional control, that realization can be deeply uncomfortable. That is one reason some narcissists suddenly reappear just as you begin truly moving forward. They may become curious, nostalgic, unexpectedly affectionate, or emotionally reactive after sensing that something inside you has changed. But here is what truly matters. Your confidence was never built by making them jealous or proving your value. It grew because you finally reconnected with yourself after spending too much time trapped inside someone else's emotional control. In the end, long-term no contact is not about making a narcissist suffer. Its true purpose is breaking the cycle that kept your emotions tied to another person's need for control. That is why silence often affects narcissists so deeply. Your silence removes their access. It removes their certainty. It takes away the emotional reactions they once depended on to feel important, powerful, or secure. Some respond with fake indifference. Others return using affection, guilt, apologies, or manipulation. Some become angry, obsessive, or continue watching from a distance without ever reaching out. Although their reactions may look different, they often come from the same uncomfortable realization. They are beginning to understand that they no longer control your emotional world. And while they struggle with that loss of influence, something far more meaningful is happening inside you. You are healing. You are rebuilding your confidence. You are discovering what real peace feels like when your emotions are no longer controlled by someone else's behavior. That is the true purpose of no contact. It is not about revenge. It is not about validation. It is not about making someone chase you. Real no contact is about reclaiming your emotional freedom. It is about becoming strong enough to stop proving your worth to people who only valued having access to you when it served their needs. Sometimes the most powerful decision you can make is to quietly keep moving forward without needing the other person to finally understand what they lost. Trust yourself, protect your peace, and always remember that the greatest victory is never changing another person, it is finally setting yourself free.